5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Go, go, Astros! Here come the Astros, burning with desire. Here come the Astros, breathing orange fire. Here come the Astros, with winning on their mind. Here come the Astros, number one every time. Go, go, Astros! We want Houston! We want Houston!
Alvarez hits a high drive, center field. Veerling's back. This game is turned upside down.
And the pitch is lifted to right by Castellanos. Long run for Tucker over toward the line and foul territory. Makes the catch, and the Houston Astros do it again. 2022 World Series champions.
And now, Go Go Astros. Astros baseball from three guys who've been there since Art Howe had hair.
And good morning, Astros fans. It is November, and the best thing about being November, that means that October is early, and October is over, and we can forget that month and just pretend it never happened. And not sort of think about the outcome of that month, even if the outcome actually happened in November. And remember that a year ago yesterday, Jordan turned the world upside down, and LSU was able to defeat Alabama, unlike this weekend. So, sad weekend for me. So it is Monday. It is November 5th. This is the Go Go Astros podcast. I'm here with James Christopher.
Remember the 5th of November.
Except today's the 6th.
Is it the 6th? Oh, it's
It
the
is.
6th. Brian, look at this. Good rehearsal, everybody.
Look, I'm in Las Vegas and I know what day it is. What's wrong
That's
with
crazy.
you two?
Oh, hold on. If you're in Vegas, days are a number and counting. And the most important thing you do in Vegas is counting. If you stop counting, that's how they get you.
Look, I'm enjoying my free oxygen, which they pump into my room excessively, which, I mean, it's better than some things I'm going to be getting later.
Free oxygen in the morning, free drinks in the evening, or
Fantastic.
the morning, depending on how you do it. There are lots of different ways. This is November, whatever date it is, which means that we can turn the page from the season to the Astros offseason and start sort of looking ahead to what they're going to do this offseason. And I guess the first sort of item of agenda for the Astros this offseason is getting a new manager. We talked about sort of Dusty last time, but now let's sort of look ahead to, is there anything we particularly want in a new manager? Are there things that we should be looking for in the managerial search? Do we have confidence in Jim Crane and Jeff Bagwell to make this decision? Andy, I'll start with you. To those questions most compels you.
I mean, confidence is confident. We will have a manager, so I do have confidence that they will actually replace the position, if that's what you're going with.
You certainly will.
I do also want to apologize for my low lighting. Rooms at the Mandalay Bay are not designed for anything but sleeping.
I think you should have done it from the aquarium.
I tried to do it from the casino floor, but they were not keen with me setting up a laptop. I don't know why. Anyway, I think it's interesting. It'll be very interesting when the process ends, because right now all we have is kind of speculations and ghosts in the machine about who's saying what, and who's in charge of what, and who's responsible for what, and who's going to have the most say. I tend to believe that the news, I guess, this weekend that Dana Brown is pushing for Joe Espada with Jim Crane to be the next manager, but is still understanding he's going to conduct interviews to do due diligence. That to me makes sense, because they should cast a wide net. They should talk to everybody that's available, even if they know who they want to hire. And I'm not pretending that Dana Brown's saying that to Bob Nightingale, if you believe Bob Nightingale, is in any way discounting Brian McTaggart's reporting or any of that kind of stuff. I don't really want to get into that piece. But it'll be interesting from the hindsight of how long do you stretch this process out if you're just going to end up circling back to Espada anyway. Unlike, major or the NFL and the NBA to some extent, the major league manager doesn't have a lot to do with roster construction. So not having a manager outside of, maybe it affects free agents who might want to sign with you or not want to sign with you, doesn't really affect how the team needs to approach the offseason. Not like not having a GM last year affected the Astros.
Yeah.
So this is something where I think it's the right choice to take your time to talk to anybody who's interested that's qualified and get to that point of we've made a decision that's best for the team. I think at the end of all this, we're still going to end up hiring Joe Espada. He's still going to end up being the manager. But I don't mind the approach, even if it's longer than some Astros fans want it to take.
I want to, first of all, I know that like the sort of knee-jerk reaction is that it's a Bagwell Crane decision, but honestly, that was said once by McTaggart, and then every other time McTaggart's referred to it, it's been Dana Brown and Jim Crane, which indicates to me that he misspoke, and the misspeaking was every time it was corrected, the misspeaking was sort of ignored, and then we were just running with that same narrative, which I don't know why, but we are. What's funny, Brian, I don't know that I have a hard no person. I have a personality type I don't want. And I think that personality type is best epitomized in Joe Madden. I don't think this is a team. Like I've seen guys on Twitter talking about, oh, we need a guy that's going to come in there and like kick ass and do whatever. That's fine for a young team. For a professional team that's made it to 7 straight ALCSs, I want someone who's going to go in there and keep the clubhouse together. And also, as it turns out, we're learning as we listen to some of the things Dusty said post leaving, somebody that's not going to do things that defy logic just because. And I think we're seeing things like Dusty knowing he was wanting out before the season really even started, to comments he made about paying too much attention to what people said, both on social media and in writing, but also it did seem like he was being obstinate for obstinate's sake, when now the report is many people in the front office were expressing displeasure with how he was playing the team. And I don't know that whatever manager you get, I don't know that that's going to wash. I think and maybe Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but it seems like to me the typical construction is general manager builds the team and you play the team as built. And your job really is to keep the personalities in check over 162. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a strong personality out of a manager, and I'm not looking for someone that's going to come try to like kick ass for some reason, which I think that's kind of Joe Madden's MO.
But what if Jake Taylor was available? Because Tom Berenger always plays the character who's a streetwide SOB who comes in and kicks a little ass.
Well, I would take Jake Taylor, but I don't know that Jake Taylor really at the end of the day kicked a lot of ass. If anything, it was Rube being in the gall-darn major leagues, boys.
The worst
in the lesson
of the Major League Series.
The lesson of Major League 2 is that talent outweighs managerial skill.
Very much.
And the lesson of Major League 1 is that people who graduate from Pomona College can write some really funny stuff.
Although we did learn that Lou Brown was a big fan of Elizabethan Shakespeare
and white walls.
Yes. So one possibility is that there is a tire store manager out there somewhere who's really the perfect manager for the Astros, and that's another thing they should consider. Scouting through some of the finest BF Goodrich store employees. I think James's point is right here, that the manager, and I talked about this a lot last week in talking about sort of Dusty, like what did Dusty do really well is he kept controversies, flare-ups, and egos in check and kept players focused. And the thing about a team that is led by Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman, they don't need someone to tell them to, get motivated. They don't need someone to tell them to work hard and grind. That's how they got here, right? That is their personality. And it's something that has rubbed off across the team, that they, but you may argue they work a little too hard sometimes. They're a little too sort of focused and need to be sort of, they could use someone who's a little bit more, in a clubhouse, who's a little bit more of a joker than what they've had. But it's worked very well. What are you going to tell Jose Altuve that he has not already seen in his decade in Major League Baseball?
Yeah,
right?
right.
What situation has he not encountered, including, being on this miserable team that's winning 50 games, right? And he's the only hope for the team, right? And to, any situation in the playoffs. And so again,
well, that brings up an interesting point too, because like if let's use the name that everybody cringes at, that like let's say it is Brad Ausmus, but the interesting thing would be is like, what is Brad Ausmus going to tell Jose Altuve about buckling down in the World Series, because he doesn't have that experience himself? Andy, you look like you're about to comment.
Well, to something Brian just said, I think one of the things that Dusty Baker brought to this team as a manager was to keep guys like Alex Bregman from burning themselves up during the year. And if you're looking at qualities of a manager, I know, Twitter has one opinion, Facebook has another opinion, Sports Talk Radio has too many opinions. I think you need somebody who is fiery's kind of overrated in my world for baseball. You need somebody who understands the personalities, which I think Brian wrote very eloquently about in one of his Substacks recently. You need somebody who understands when a guy is hurting but doesn't want to talk about it. You need guys who understand that they're going to have a day off. This asinine, and this isn't the Yainer Diaz usage conversation. This is, how do I get a 32-year-old second baseman through a season where he's at his peak by the postseason? That was Dusty Baker's strength, and AJ Hinch towards the end was very good at that as well. We don't have to play every game every day, balls to the wall. We have to get through the marathon to be in good enough shape to be hot at the right time to get through the playoffs. And that's a skill I think a lot of people overlook from a baseball manager standpoint, is managing that clubhouse, managing those personalities, knowing when guys are going through it, need a day off, knowing when you've got to protect that day off no matter what the situation is. That's different to me than I'm obstinately going to play Martin Maldonado over Yainer Diaz because he's a veteran and he's not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the one thing we said at the beginning is important. I'm happy if they interview a lot of people. And it should be noted, we have no one's reported that they have conducted an interview yet. The actual sort of reporting on what they want is small. The speculation is most of what the reporting has been. Just not a criticism of McTaggart or Rome or anybody. I think it's just
it's just a list of names everybody's going to be interested in, Frank. A lot of them.
Right. They could be 100% wrong, which again, is not a criticism of their reporting. It's just, hey, these are names that have some connection. And again, part of, if you look at the other managerial searches going on, it's a lot of, trying to sort of find who are the best young minds in baseball who could do this job and move that. I'll be interested to see. I hope they sort of interview people like that. Will Venable of the Rangers bench coach, who's someone who has long been in that situation. Obviously, Joe Espada is somebody in that sort of situation and who's sort of been looked at there if they're interested in a young manager. Again, they have lots of sort of possibilities, and I'm open to. I won't be excited if it's Brad Ausmus, but I'll give him a chance. And there's almost no one I would look at and say, like, I think this is going to be a disaster. It's hard to tell on managers, of course.
I think the interesting thing about Brown letting it be known that he's pushing for Espada means that if, in my mind, and I'm speculating here, Dana Brown has had conversations with Joe Espada over the course of the season. And there are probably some things that Joe Espada told him, I'd probably do this differently if it was my choice. And if I'm Dana Brown and I'm the GM and I want to be aligned with my manager and I'm pushing for this guy, I would imagine you would see more alignment than you saw with Brown and Baker, who Dusty, right, wrong, or indifferent, didn't have to answer to Dana Brown.
Yeah, Dusty was empowered, and part of the stories you see both during the season and after the season is people feeling they couldn't. It's not that Dusty made a decision and he had to go with it. It's that Dusty made a decision and they didn't think they were getting a fair hearing. And that's part of why people were leaking, which I think is my interpretation of the Chas McCormick's not playing leaks. As much as I like making banana pudding jokes as much as anybody, and as much as I like banana pudding as much as anybody.
Yeah, banana pudding is an underrated dessert.
Chas McCormick's brother was very disappointed.
I understand. Let's talk players here. The Astros now enter the offseason, and I wrote on this on my Substack yesterday. And here's the good news. The first set of projections are out from Fangraphs, and they give everyone how many WAR they have, add that up for all the players. Astros are second highest in the majors walking into the offseason. I don't know what sort of bad news, but sort of the other sort of news is the reason they're that is because they have very few holes. They have a shopping list that's very small. It's relief pitcher and backup catcher. Should the list be longer? James, I'll start with you. Are there other
I think
holes or sort of areas you see?
I would like to also see so for as much as I don't like to like Monday morning quarterback stuff, the Abreu signing for what the production was versus what it cost. I don't know if I hope Jim Crane realized that he might have to go above the luxury tax. And look, none of us think Jim Crane is cheap because that's factually incorrect. But I do wonder because I'd like to see a little bit more power out of the first base position. And I'd like to see a really set, either is Chas McCormick the center fielder or is there somebody different? Because I don't want to do this again that we've done all year. We also learned last night that Mauricio Dumond's role as the utility man is what he's best at, not being starting in any position. So if we can make it work, I'd like to see a little bit more set in the outfield, and a little bit more power out of first base. But I think that is going to mean that Jim Crane's going to have to acknowledge that the Montero deal and the Abreu deal maybe weren't the best and have to go over the luxury tax penalty at least for a couple of seasons here to keep things moving.
Andy.
I think the shopping list is right. In a perfect world, I would like to see us pick up another left fielder or center fielder. I think whoever the next manager is going to be, and I think Dana Brown has kind of alluded to this, Chas McCormick is going to need to get a full-time shot without having to look over his shoulder.
Yeah.
I think when he got consistent playing time over the last 2 years, he's productive enough. I don't think he's going to be the best statistical center fielder in baseball the way he was for a couple of months during this past season. That's he got very hot at a good time. Fantastic. But he's good enough to be an everyday starter, even with his inability to hit left-handed hitters or pitchers sometimes. But I think you have to answer that. Yordan Alvarez is a great player, but Yordan Alvarez isn't going to be the everyday left fielder, or at least probably shouldn't be, based on how his ability to stay healthy has been very questionable. Every year he's missed games for some physical ailment that he's been a major leaguer, up to and including missing an entire COVID season. So I would rather see somebody in either left field or center field. And I think if you're expanding the list, that's what you have to expand on. The payroll thing is going to be for somebody else to figure out, because what you have to deal, the only way you're going to get under that number or stay at that number and still sign people to help your team is you're going to, deal Jake Myers. Jake Myers isn't taking a big bite of that apple.
Yeah.
In fact, the guys who are most fungible aren't really going to help you from that number. So, Crane's going to have to, and I say have to, like, I get a choice about this. He's going to have to expand a little bit, and he's proven that he will, and he'll at least get very close to that number if he doesn't go over. I tend to believe that we're going to follow the same model that we follow. We have to have a backup catcher of some stature, and I know we're probably going to talk about candidates for that in just a second. We need 2 or 3 more relievers, I think, although the solving it internally thing sounds like a couple of the people we're expecting to start are going to end up in the bullpen in one way or the other. And so the team is kind of set. And, to Brian's point, from a good news, bad news standpoint, is a very talented team. It's a team that should win a lot of games and a team that has a history of doing well in the playoffs. But I think the ceiling for getting better is limited by that payroll number. And so I can see a world where we open the season with minimal changes outside of the things we just talked about. And then at the trade deadline, it becomes a lot more palatable to go find another outfielder. Or if Jose Abreu goes through the same struggles that he went through the first three quarters of this year, to find more power at first base or whatever those needs are when they arise. That's how I see this playing out more, which is an exciting news for Astros fans. And it's not fun because I'm on a plane last night watching videos about these top free agents, and all of them are tied to the Rangers right now. That it's not fun as an Astros fan in free agency because we're not gonna sign Shohei Ohtani. We're not going to be after the top tier of free agents, most likely, unless something dramatic changes with the philosophy of how Jim Crane runs the team.
And I think that's like that philosophy is what also gotten us here, right? Like I don't.
Yeah, but it's more.
just,
I'm just. It's not
yeah.
wrong. It's just.
No, yeah, it's not going to be very sexy. You're not going to see the Astros win December or whatever it is.
No, signing Jorge Alfaro to be your backup catcher isn't going to move anybody's needle.
Just to give some context on the Astros payroll situation, you see a handful of different estimates out there. The one I like best is from Roster Research, which is on Fangraphs, which says the Astros are at the moment at $231 million. The first threshold is at $237 million, so less than just over $5 million away when you sort of add in change there. So, will it cost you to add a reliever? $10 million. Will it cost you to add a backup catcher? A couple $1 million. It won't be ton, and they could get away with some very sort of cheap options there. But if they do anything basically this offseason that isn't adding minor league free agents with invitations to spring training, they'll go over the threshold. Now, I think they decided to go over the threshold back at the trade deadline. This decision's already been made because at the trade deadline, they added 2 players with contracts for not only 2023, but also 2024 in Kendall Graveman, who's going to make $8 million this year. They could have targeted a reliever who's a free agent. And then Justin Verlander, the Mets are paying most of his salary, but I believe the Astros owe him like $17 or $18 million, and that's the number that goes on their luxury tax payroll. So they added to this already. They decided to go over this. It should be noted that Jim, two sort of notes here that I think are important. One, from a sort of shorter term thing, the Astros would have paid the luxury tax in 2020 had there been a real 2020 season. They were over the threshold in 2020, was lower then. And they would have paid it. They didn't have to because that got suspended as part of the COVID season. The second, and I think this is a historical point that we are uniquely sort of able to make. Jim Crane is the Astros owner who has been most generous in payroll.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some broader changes in the game because that's sort of generally true across sort of people, but we've been doing this long enough to have spent most of the 90s and early 2000s going into the offseason is which good player are they going to trade because they're going to keep their payroll artificially low.
Right.
And they made tons of those trades. That's what the Cam and Eddie, and that's what the 18-player trade with the Padres was about with Cam and Eddie and Finley. That's why they traded guys like Mike Hampton and Billy Wagner and Carl Everett, is that, we want to keep our stars, Bagwell and Biggio, and they're probably right to do that. But we got to find other ways to limit the payroll here. The Jim Crane Astros have never made such a trade. They have never sort of found a guy who's like, he's going to be a free agent in a year or two. We need to get rid of him now to get some value for him now because we got to keep the payroll down. So Jim Crane, I've been highly critical of Jim Crane, but on this one, he has done, overall. And again, they've lost a lot of free agents. That's mostly Jim Crane doesn't want to pay more than 5 years for a free agent, which is, again,
smart.
There are cost and benefits to that, but there are clear benefits to that decision.
Well, and I think also too, I don't think I know that there's this comparison to Jerry Jones that people want to make because it's easy, but I've said this before on the show. Jerry Jones has the luxury of knowing he's going to have the most valuable football team tomorrow. Jim Crane, I think, is smart enough to realize that this is all happening because the Astros are winning, and if you look at the real estate development that they have planned, that much of that is Jim Crane led. I can't see a situation where he's going to willingly let us slide back into total mediocrity with all of that financial development riding on it. So we've talked about how there could be many steps backward, but I think the window will stay open. It just might look different going forward.
Well, and I think that to Jim Crane's benefit, he's in an environment where there is actually a punishment for exceeding payroll the way baseball is currently structured. Drake McClain had no such penalty in place when he was a manager other than his own bottom line, which is spurious at best because I don't recall him crying about how much money he made when he sold the team.
values of baseball teams, values of all sports teams keep going up. I think they actually make more money off the value going up each year than they do off profit. But that's sort of a different discussion. All right. The two clear priorities are bullpen and backup catcher. Let's start with bullpen. Does it have to be a left-hander?
No, I think the last 7 or 8 years shows no.
I think it would be a big FU to Dusty Baker to just load it up with left-handers now.
Well, I'm definitely supporting it now, since as a blogger and a podcaster, I've been directly criticized by him for not being appreciative enough of his efforts. So Wandy Peralta, Matt Moore, two lefties on the thing. Aroldis Chapman's out there too, but he's feels to me more expensive than he should be worth here, but not in my priority list.
Chapman is probably going to go somewhere where he gets the opportunity to be a closer, which is going to be a mistake for some team, but some team's going to make that mistake. I'm intrigued by Matt Moore if you're looking just strictly as a left-hander. I thought he was the best of the Angels salary dump after the trade deadline, before the waiver wire deadline last year. And I was hoping if there was anybody the Astros were going to put a bid in, he'd be somebody that would have helped our team this year. And I think he's obtainable. You look at the other big left-hander that's available, Josh Hader. That's not a guy who's available to the Astros. That's not something we should pay for, frankly. And this is where I get into this idea that this is boring. Some team's going to sign Josh Hader, and it's going to be a big splash, and they're going to sell more season tickets because of it. It's not going to be the Astros. As a matter of fact, if there's anybody that you have ever seen on ESPN or gotten a web gem or any of those kind of things, we're probably not signing them. So just stop. The other hand is we're not going to sign Anthony Bass. We're not going to sign those kind of guys either. It is going to be, I think you look at two relief pitchers, probably one left-handed, one right-handed, and then the other holes in the bullpen, as bullpens tend to get constructed, will be whatever happens to be left over through the winter in your own system, and then through spring training, you'll put it together, and it'll be a constantly moving kind of thing. Hector Neris will be a loss. I don't think we should afford him. He is at an age where decline could happen suddenly and precipitously. And I think to sign him, you'd be getting yourself into another Montero deal. Now, with better performance short term, but I think you'd be handcuffing yourself. So I like Matt Moore if we're talking just about left-handers right now, though.
Yeah, I agree. He's a name on my list. A name that's sort of increasing in people's things is Robert Stevenson, who went to the Rays and got better. The Astros sort of have a track record of improving this guy, though it may take like a 3-year contract for him. And I try to avoid a 3-year contract for a reliever because in general, they're just so volatile. And that's sort of part of that is the Rafael Montero story. So hopefully we get the volatility coming back in the good direction next year. Backup catcher. Okay, we can go through names on a list here. You're happy to mention them here. I want to mention, I think, a skill that the Astros should be considering in their backup catcher. Yainer Diaz has decent numbers. He throws really well. His blocking numbers, at least according to the numbers, scouts may disagree, are pretty good. One thing Yainer Diaz doesn't do very well is frame pitches. So one thing I think they might want to target is looking for a good framer to be the backup to steal some strikes that way. They had neither catcher was a good framer this year. It's something they can consider. I guess the other alternative is Cesar Salazar good enough to be the backup catcher? So those thoughts.
Salazar's interesting from a standpoint of that payroll number that we talked about. He's not going to cost you much in that world. He's going to be a major league minimum type player, and if
definitely major league minimum.
If he plays, 2 days a week, and it'll be interesting, that usage pattern. I don't think that's bad, and I could absolutely see a world where the Astros start the season that way. I know the name that's out there right now is Austin Hedges, and I think some of the Gold Glove stats that came out yesterday showed that he had a lot of value for a limited amount of playing time, a ridiculous amount of defensive value for the limited amount of playing time. I don't think it's real controversial for a lot of Astros fans. What I don't want the Astros to do is re-sign Martin Maldonado. There's beyond the diminishing performance, and I love Martin Maldonado. I just the Astros need to get away from the safety blanket of Martin Maldonado.
Yep.
And I'm afraid if you bring him back, even at the lowest amount that he's willing to sign for, and you're willing to pay him, he is going to undermine Yainer Diaz's development as the starting catcher. And I don't think that's anything malicious. I just think that's the way it would end up happening. You have too many pitchers who rely too heavily on Martin Maldonado to get them through situations. And frankly, if we're riding with Fromber, I think Verlander's his own thing, and he'll pitch to whoever he wants to pitch to. But if you're riding with Fromber, well, he didn't have Martin Maldonado as his personal catcher at the beginning of 22. It was Jason Castro until he got hurt. Mm-hmm. So that's not a
I do wonder how much this whole Fromber, I mean, how much this Martin Maldonado thing was real and how much of it was Dusty's sort of excuse. Personally.
Well, I think what it looks like to me in hindsight is that Dusty, even though he speaks some level of Spanish, it was easier to communicate through Martin Maldonado, who these guys trusted, than it was to communicate directly with a struggling pitcher.
Yeah.
I think that is one of the skills that we probably don't talk about. Anybody needs to be able to speak Spanish in a way that these guys understand it. Mm-hmm. But I'm looking at this list on MLB. None of these guys. I don't want Gary Sanchez. Nobody should want Gary Sanchez catching baseballs on your baseball team.
He's definitely repetitive of Yainer Diaz's skill set.
Yeah, but if you're signing somebody, Austin Hedges makes a lot of sense to me. It also weakens the Rangers a little bit, which I hate that we're in that world, but we are. I don't know if there's a more interesting name. Because catchers are kind of this is not a great era in Major League Baseball for catchers.
I think it's the space, like you said. I think you just go with the internal candidate, honestly. You're talking about him playing 2 days a week. I would much rather have any of that extra money going to bullpen and outfield help. If we're talking about 2 games a week, Yanier needs to play. So I think you can kind of take a knee on that position twice a week.
Well, it's interesting though, right? So what's the most games Yainer has ever caught in a season? 60-ish? I don't have it in front of me, but it's not a big number. So expecting him to all of a sudden catch 100 games. Then
you're not talking about a backup catcher at that point. You're talking about a platoon situation.
Job share, yeah.
Yeah, but I think 100 games is probably the target at this point. So you've got to have somebody make up those other 62 games. And if that the days of the week doesn't really matter.
Yeah. There are very few catchers who catch more than 100 games.
Yeah. The only catcher in Major League Baseball in the last 5 years who's caught more than 130 games is Real Muto. And he's only done it 3 times. It's not an era where catchers are used the way they used to be used. So I think, we look that would be the hesitation. I'm bringing it up on Salazar because it is a guy who's going to have to play 60 games, maybe 70 games. So it is a timeshare more than what we saw last year. But clearly they want to bring Yainer along, but you're going to have somebody if he falters and struggles like he's likely to do.
And so those are really the 2 positions that we'll see. We've talked about outfield as a possibility. The other thing I see Astros fans talking about is starting pitcher. They're bringing back 6 starting pitchers from last season, and they're going to get back Lance McCullers and Luis Garcia at some point, not opening day, but at some point in 2024, hopefully happy and, ready to go. What free agent pitcher is going to sign here under those circumstances, particularly if they don't have a ton of money to offer?
It's the same situation they were in last year. It would be the kind of guy you would get. It's not the kind of guy that's going to lead and dominate a rotation. It's going to be a guy that is coming in hoping to make a roster. And for me, it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a lot of money into that position because, again, the quality of candidate you're going to get is not going to be a guy that's going to change things. And if you are that guy, why would you run the risk of the Astros returning, like you said, 6 or 7 guys, basically? It's the exact same conundrum they were in last year. And I will
the
not
pitching
fault
was
him for not.
frustrating last year, but the problem with the pitching is our pitchers who we thought, who had pitched better than that, particularly Frommer and Javier, didn't pitch as well as they had.
Yeah.
And so those two guys need to improve, turn it around. And that's sort of the issue, and sort of figuring that out is, I think, more than we can offer here on the podcast, other than, they need to do that. And they have track records that should make us have some confidence that they can.
And if you want to talk about what kind of guys you're going to get, you could look at former Astros. If you just want to have the reunion, Wade Miley's going to be available.
Well, he's just being Miley.
And also Jake Odorizzi is a free agent this year. Colin McHugh's out there. I guess you could have him start again if you need to.
Can we get his ex-wife back though? Because I'd like that.
Keuchel is also on the is also.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a few different former Astros, and since there is a portion of our fan base who always loves that, there are options out there. But that's the level of guy you're talking about. I don't know that it's better than any option that we have internally. I think we could all argue the number of starting pitchers. 6 come back. I have a lot more faith in Luis Garcia coming back and being able to pitch effectively than I do Lance McCullers Jr. at this point. And that's not picking on Lance McCullers Jr., but he hasn't been healthy since 2021.
Ever?
I mean, he had his first surgery in 2018, and it's been very hit or miss since then. I think he has 1 full season in that plane, and we're paying him like a frontline starting pitcher. I think we've gotten five regular season starts.
Many more years.
Yeah, we've gotten 5 regular season starts under that new contract.
Yeah, if you're counting on Lance McCullers, I've got a bridge I can sell you. Like, I mean, and then the other thing too is he's so beat up.
Hold on. We may be solving our bullpen issue right there.
But that's what I was going to say though, Brian. But can his arm put up the repetition of?
Yeah, how does that make sense? I was fully on board with young Lance McCullers before the arm troubles being a bullpen guy, because I think that was something I saw happening. But now it's a guy you would carry who can pitch 1 inning every 5 days. And we're paying him $25 million a year.
Yeah. For 3 more seasons. It's the year more than the price on McCullers. That is the big deal. But anyway, so we could get something from Lance McCullers next year. We should get something from Luis Garcia, and we have 6 starting pitchers, and then one of them will be in the bullpen. There's a handful of spots available. There's a very sort of small shopping list. So, we'll be stretching for topics over the offseason here on the podcast, because they'll hire a manager. That'll be a big deal. And they'll sign a backup catcher, and that won't be. But we will be here to cover it. Andy, I'll let you and then James have your final parting thoughts.
I mean, my parting thought, I probably said it 5 times, just prepared to be bored for the next few months, because we're not signing Aaron Nola. We're not signing Blake Snell. We're not signing Sonny Gray. So just enjoy the ride and know you're going to have a good baseball team to watch come March. Go Astros.
I do have some programming notes. First of all, I want to wish a early happy Veterans Day to all my brothers and sisters out there who have ever put on a uniform. But also, we will be off on Thursday, the 13th, as I will be having surgery. And then we'll be off the 20th because I'll be coming back from having seen Harry Potter and the Cursed Child and The Shark is Broken on Broadway. We'll be back on the 27th to hopefully talk manager and other things. And I will be having a guest. The new puppy Orbit will be with us on that show. So tune in to watch a 10-week-old puppy talk about baseball.
Never work with kids or dogs.
The kids I avoided through most of my film career. The dogs I tried every single time.
Well, first of all, remember the first rule of comedy: you can never grow armed with a monkey. So we will.
Clint Eastwood would beg to differ.
I wish they taught that in film school. All right, everybody. First of all, I got the solution. You never go wrong with a monkey.
So, always true, always works. On that thought, everybody. Happy Veterans Day, happy Thanksgiving, and we will see you after that. Go Astros.